Thanks a million. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Cian and I'm the CEO of Safecility. And when Alan asked me to have a talk with you, what we really are keen to start sharing with people is the experience of implementing IoT in buildings in the built estate and the built environment, but also some of the inherent challenges and pitfalls our project teams are experiencing and our customers are experiencing in making their way through what is still a very young and emerging space in the construction and prop tech sector. So I think we'll all be familiar to a greater or lesser extent with some of the promises that have been made on IoT and particularly smart buildings. It's a small sample, but we're all feeling quite pressured to be deploying some of this 1.5 trillion in IoT solutions, or 105 billion by 2024. And when we're shown all of the areas within the built estate that we're supposed to be deploying them in, we're probably doing an assessment of how few within our buildings are actually automated. So the challenge that presents itself to building and asset owners is, where am I going to get bang for my buck? And the decade is only going to get worse, because the likes of Forrester and the predictive forecasting companies are going to tell you that one, smart buildings is really easy. Chips are really cheap. Devices are really easy to use. Connectivity costs are disappearing. And there's lots of startups. So why aren't you doing it? Separately, you're going to be told that all you need is cloud. Software is going to make all of your problems disappear, which is true, but which software is going to do it for you? And if you just migrated to our cloud platform, all of your IoT installations and all of your value would be unlocked. And finally, you're being told that your productivity is just going to go off the charts. Energy reduction in buildings, tenant experiences is going to be enhanced. Your maintenance challenges and your maintenance costs, the budgets are going to shrink. So there's a lot of questions that are left for asset owners to think about when they're told that the next decade of IoT technology is going to be great. One of the greatest challenges is that 85% of our buildings that we will live in 2050 are already built. So how is it that this technology is going to unlock this value for 85% of the buildings that we're about to live in? And if I am building or I am constructing, how do I put this in at the base in order to unlock value? We've probably seen more customers come at it from that direction than from the other direction. What are my strategic objectives? Why do I need this building to be smart? What's it supposed to do? And what are the ways that smartness enhances the customer experience in my management of the building? How can we harness these technologies cost effectively? And do we need the internal capacity to manage it? These questions kind of disappear, but they're actually the starting points for all of the successful projects we've seen. So the question we start with when we're posing and talking to our clients is, if your buildings can report on themselves as the technology increasingly promises, what would you have them tell you, and how much would it save you? And what we've found over the last 2 years is that it's actually safety and compliance that are the killer application for smart buildings. Technology can provide significantly enhanced value in both financial and in compliance and safety and legal terms. There's a number of push factors here at play that are making this the best jumping off point for adopting technology. COVID-19 is probably the latest to jump on that list. Lockdowns are making it more difficult to conduct legally required testing, whether that's on your fire system, your water system, any of your other health and safety infrastructure in your building. They're all, regularly inspected under law, and reporting needs to be maintained. Inspection for elderly and vulnerable tenants, if you're a landlord or an asset owner in that space, or an elderly care operator, these represent infection control risks. Sending people in to do health and safety inspections is no longer the risk-free entity that it was. Separately, we're seeing regulatory change across the water in the UK that's likely to have implications over the next decade. The golden thread paradigm looks at how you stitch digital reporting into buildings to create a vast database of compliance. Whether they fully execute it or not remains to be seen, but without a doubt, it's the legal and government direction, and inevitably asset owners are going to have to follow. Budgets, you'll all be familiar with the shrinking budgets for more work. As Hackett pushes compliance obligations higher, budgets for achieving that work are going to shrink. And as a result, somehow we're going to have to introduce a new way of doing business to do what's legally required at a cost that we can bear. And the final push factor is actually rapid aging. As I mentioned above, some of our largest property owners are operating elderly care facilities, which is one dynamic. Separately, an aging population makes recruiting skilled technicians difficult. People who need to inspect your fire alarms or test and maintain your equipment and systems are getting thinner and thinner on the ground and harder to recruit. As the costs of recruiting go up, the difficulties inherent in that become cost related, and technology again becomes the answer. So there's a number of reasons people are being pushed towards the tech. The tech itself is providing now a pull factor. We're seeing a huge amount of hardware innovation. It is cheaper, that is true. It does an awful lot more, that's also true. And you can actually get very, very good value from executing at scale. So the choice has exploded. The difficulty is making them all talk to each other, which we'll come to later. Affordability, we're seeing a lot of business model innovation. I think people who introduced smart buildings and IoT would be more familiar with the pay your money upfront as a capital cost, do a huge amount of installation and integration, and leave it sit there under license for 20 years. Business model innovation now is delivering these as a service where, recurring revenue over a month, the cost of the project can be broken down, and you can benefit from iterative updates to software as they're released. We're all being pushed towards digital transformation in the services sector, and that means that IoT and technologies like sensors, actuators, controllers, and cloud reporting platforms are critical to achieve the strategic mission of most of our businesses now in the construction and PropTech sector. But the final piece of a pull factor is platform thinking. The availability of solutions that are designing to interact with each other versus a series of closed sandboxes. Our sector has been riddled with sandbox logic for close to 20 years. We are now seeing far more API integration and far more open interoperability at scale that's likely to generate huge potential solutions for customers as they need to tailor to their exact requirements. So if we could get our buildings at scale to report on themselves, we've seen that unlocking value comes when you're legally obliged to do things. You have to turn up, you have to test, you have to inspect, you have to report, and then you have to repair. What if all of that could be automated? That's what we're working on. So at the top, you'll see how we have designed a system to get rid of what's a 7-step manual process where an engineer has to, under law, inspect equipment, either weekly, monthly, or quarterly, depending on the equipment. Those written reports need to be completed to track each item of inventory. Emergency lights, that could be 1,000 units of inventory in every walk around. Data entry has to go to the compliance manager. You have to review all of the reports. Obviously, some of that can be done on Excel, but reviews take place, checklists are compiled, and then repairs are done at step 6 and 7. An IoT solution that works and that saves has to automate so much of that process, but once it does, you can reduce your visits by 95% to equipment over 5 years. And that comes with a 10 times improvement in your compliance data. The quality of the data is enhanced. It's all available in a central database. It's all interrogatable and presented on a graphic reporting tool. So from a compliance point of view, your workload is significantly diminished from an investment in sensors that do a good job. So how did we come to this? Here's the example for projects for our clients. We found that when you start with telling people of all of the value in smart buildings and all of the money that the market's going to be worth, they get very confused. When we get the best results, we usually start with the end. If a building's going to report on itself, the organization has to start with what it's going to report on, why they want it, and where then we can get sensors and infrastructure to deliver bang for the buck. So here you see a manual inspection of emergency lighting system. This is a simple service map that our clients would start with before procuring our emergency lighting solution. they'd map out all of the work that they do and start assigning the costs, both in man hours, overhead, and in terms of compliance, to all of these different steps. Once you begin to work out the different steps in the process, you can see that to achieve value, you actually have very high expectations on an IoT system. It's probably not sufficient to replace the manual inspection with just a sensor, because the logging of results, the ingestion, and the compliance are still very high labor intense and expertise intense. What you really need to do to unlock the value is to automate the first 4 steps of the service so that you only have people involved when remedial work needs to take place. So with the process mapped and the data logging and the data ingestion and the compliance logging noted as central points in the process, we're telling the clients that the only way that you'll truly unlock the value you think you can get is boxing all 4 of those steps into an automated process and leaving yourself repairs at the end. So the mistakes that come from this inverted approach, or sorry, from not taking an inverted approach and starting at the end and working backwards, some of you who've executed this may know it, but we've seen an awful lot of clients who have done the kid in the sweet shop, where they've taken an awful lot of different bits of hardware. They've tried a bit here and a bit there. They haven't fully integrated anything. They haven't fully adopted anything. And so they have no real strategic leadership or strategic goal over why they're trying these devices. And as a result, they have indecision. This is basically a small budget for tinkering and tailoring, but it's not going to achieve any business success for you or for your team. The second mistake we see is highlighted above, not knowing your process. IoT solutions like ours and others are a toolkit. They're not able to make themselves work. You need to know the job that they're going to do, and you need to pick the correct tool. And that's where you're really relying on the companies that are developing these tools to help you understand. And not all the tools are going to be right. And that's where you need a trusted partner in developing these processes. Square peg and round hole is one of the most common approaches we've seen, where it's tempting to get a sensor to do a job it's not built for. And it's tempting to do that because of price primarily. You can find something 50% cheaper that might do half the job, or it might do the job kind of. Rarely does this make for a successful outcome. As soon as the wheels start to fall off, the investment starts to look like it has to be written off. And the final element of a mistake is a lack of standards. It's very tempting in a new space like IoT and smart buildings to trust the experts like myself, or Brendan, or John, or Alan, and instead allow us to pick the standards. Businesses are always going to pick the standards that suit the sale of the product. But what we need from the clients is the clients actually need to pick and stick to standards, whether that's for communication, should be on it. If you're picking a platform for your data ingestion, all of your devices should be on it. So getting your building to report in itself is the end goal. To do that, you need to figure out what the reports are that unlock the value. And then you need to assess you don't actually need all the sensors. There's a lot of sensors out there, and about 5% of them are going to do the job for you. Once you've mapped your process, you can overlay your workflow and then stress test the devices against the job that needs to be done. If we don't know the job to be done, we're going to fail at the project. Secondly, do it right, not cheap. And that means implementing a solution that does half the job. If we just go back to the emergency lighting process, if we implement a solution that just looks at the lighting, we're spending potentially 80% of the entire budget to do something that does 50% of the job. As a result, we don't eliminate any labor because 50% of the rest of the work needs to be done by people. Those people are retained. All of the processes are retained, and you now have an enormous amount of duplication and the cost of a new system. So doing it right may be more expensive, but doing it right will unlock the 90% efficiency savings that are promised from the project. So the commitment is the hardest part, and that's really the way that we unlock value from these projects over time. The last element is being creative and being brave. Compliance workloads are huge and taxing. A smart building that can automatically test itself can inform you of its own non-compliance and the regulator if that's the way your fire certs or whatever are set up. The best way to do it is to tell us what you want to automate, demand it from your vendors, and it'll turn up. We are available for any questions. Thanks a million for your time. I appreciate it, Alan, for the invite.
Apologies, I had my mute on there. Apologies. Thanks, that was really fascinating. Just one observation on that. When we talk about smart buildings, the connotation tends to be about, you know, buildings that are energy efficient and, you know, sustainable. Sustainability didn't really feature in your push factors there. Is that because things have changed in the last 6 or more months?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what we've looked at in terms of the core IoT is what are the main push factors in terms of generating a return. You're right, environmental and energy considerations are high on the list. In many cases, a lot of steps have been taken in those regards. We found when we talk about IoT energy solutions, a lot of clients believe that they have the sufficient work done. So as a push factor for them, many don't perceive it as a driver for smart building adoption. A lot of the
and you also mentioned the Hackett there, and obviously this is very important for, you know, clients or multiple building owners, you know, or building, you know, local authorities properties. They need to see in the round that their buildings are compliant. Could you just, before we go out for questions, just give us a sense of, you know, what Safecility does? I mean, you know, what technology you're putting in place?
Sure.
How do you make it happen, you know?
Sure. So we've developed a set of hardware devices that can monitor critical fire safety and life safety systems. So emergency lighting, Legionella, we can listen for alarm sounder testing, and we have a roadmap to develop integrations to, say, wireless fire alarms. And what we do is we deliver that data immediately up to the cloud using a cellular network. So there's no gateways or IP addresses required within buildings or estates. All of our devices report directly to the cloud. And in the cloud, we've built a compliance platform where we can register each building, then register each building's individual asset that needs to be monitored, and trigger compliance ratings against each building for our customers. So if I'm a local authority who needs to report on my emergency lighting testing every month, you can implement the Safecility emergency lighting modules in your buildings, and you can see the compliance testing and reporting across your estate. This could be up to 30 or 40,000 emergency lights that you may spend, you know, $500,000 or $1 million a year on manpower inspecting, given the geographic spread. So the
very good. Okay.
Potential benefits are enormous at scale. Similarly, we do the same for Legionella flush point monitoring, and it's all collated under a single compliance platform on the web app.
Yeah, and I suppose with this pandemic we have at the moment, I mean, is that functionality being extended to maybe, you know, monitor footfall or monitor compliance in regard to social distancing and so on? Is that kind of pushing the boundaries a bit?
Yeah, I think those are opportunities for us. Those are opportunities that our clients have asked us to look at. I think that the COVID impact for us as a business has been on the need. I think we've probably seen the slow creeping digitalization of our sector. I guess if you understand our sector broadly as kind of facility management, depending on whether it's in-house or outsourced, the slow creeping digitization that has been happening for 5 and 10 years has been accelerated because sending individuals in to do the testing is no longer really the best, cheapest way of achieving your outcomes, because each person visiting 12 buildings a day now poses a significant infection risk. You've health and safety overhead, duty of care to that employee, and also to the people that are in the buildings that are being inspected. and you have the overhead of cleaning and sanitation that needs to happen after each visit. So the digitalization has been accelerated by COVID, where people need to automate this work, and they need to automate it yesterday, given that it might be 2 years before, we're all vaccinated and back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah. Well, if anyone was watching the TV last night, that was extended by another 2 years. It could be 4 years.
Yeah.
So, I can see technology has been developed during that time. So listen, you were very good, and you're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always great. So I want to just open it up to any people. Anyone else has maybe a question? Maybe just give your name and the company you're with. We would love to hear from you this morning if you have any questions for Cian.
Hello, Cian. Paul Dolan here from AIT.
Hey, Paul.
Cian, just about retrofitting, like I presume on a new build, it's quite straightforward to integrate this technology. If you look at the bank of buildings that are here with us at the moment, like is there a difficulty in retrofitting this into the existing collection as such?
Yeah, I think that's a great challenge. Yes, there are significant challenges for retrofitting.
Yeah,
have to be worked through a number of decisions. But what we've designed,
does that become cost prohibitive then because of the fact that you?
It can do. What we've tried to achieve here is a solution that devices retrofit simply into their units, and that they report directly. So the main cost is a lot of it building rewiring or device replacement. So by eliminating the need for building rewiring, wireless, IoT and building solutions can be cost competitive. And I think the second element is that business model innovation. So you're back to the discussions around total cost of ownership versus, the sort of payback periods. Most of our clients are retrofit. They're retrofit because the costs stack up over a 5-year cost of ownership of putting one of our controllers adjacent to their emergency lights and streaming the data. Cellular IoT, like NB-IoT technology, makes it quite cheap to deliver that connectivity without having to concern yourself with blanketing estates or factories or areas in gateways and coverage extenders. And I think that's probably the element that makes it far simpler to deliver retrofit projects is connectivity, loosening the restrictions and costs around the connectivity element. Once you're into rewiring, recabling, and a lot of gateways, the cost of the projects are very high.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks, Cian.
No problem.
Yeah. So I guess, Cian, your solution might have well involved understanding clients, the hard costs of reporting on compliance, and then trying to process map that, identify where there's rework inefficiency, high labor costs, and then try and demonstrate to them how you can streamline that and digitize that. Would that be a good summary?
That's it. And I think the final step is encouraging them to take the whole process through an automation, rather than that temptation to just do half of it, where you pay for the same work twice if you do it that way. It's probably.
I mean, that's effectively what any tech startup is doing. They're re-engineering business processes or inefficient. In the case of, I know Brendan in a minute, dangerous, working with dangerous machinery, whether it's automating procurement, whatever it might be. But it's really understanding each client has a different need and want, isn't it? And then you have to tailor it to suit their needs,
Absolutely. And I think if you come at it from, sort of browsing the online marketplaces for devices and turning up at a project that way, you're probably running pretty high risks of sunk cost and failed experiences.
Okay, very good.
It's from your
Cian, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks.